The Gospel according to Matthew, the 5th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. This is the gospel of our Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Be seated. So did you wake up this morning? So did you wake up this morning feeling that you were the light of the world? Think back a moment. I'm not sure. That we gather here, our city set on a hill. I'm not sure we carry around that conviction that we are shining light as we view ourselves. But perhaps this is a bit easier to understand, this verse about us being a light, if we think of what Jesus said about himself as recorded in John's Gospel, where he says, I am the light of the world. Christ says, I am the light of the world. And perhaps that makes the passage in Matthew easier to understand, that we are the light of the world if Christ's light is shining through us, in us, and out to others. Maybe that's something that we can feel a little more comfortable with. Okay, and it also helps explain the LCI mission statement about sharing Christ's light daily, that it's Christ's light shining through us and out into the world. That is the light that we're shining. But the question I have for us this morning, and one of the questions I have, is how often do we bear witness to that light? And let me explain to you what I mean by that by giving an example. So I used to work on campus, did for about 40 years in an academic career, mostly there. And one of their commandments over there, like the 11th commandment, is you shall work all the time. Day, evenings, weekends, the whole bit. And what I would do when I was at my previous church is I would go down with a bunch of people to Mexico, to the border town of Mexicali, generally. And we, from my previous church, would work with people from a couple of churches there, Alpha Omega, La Palabra Viviente, in the suburbs of Mexicali, a very poor area. And we would attempt to help them in various ways. I'm not sure how successful we were with that, but that's what we try to do. And this would cause, I think, great consternation in my lab when I would leave work, okay, for several days a year. And when we went down to the youth group, we'd go for an entire week and take 60 teenagers with us. And it's kind of like, what are you doing? And that was an opportunity for me to bear witness to the light of Christ, to say, in the Old and New Testament, there's these clear injunctions to, serve the poor, help the needy, help the oppressed. Matthew 25, the words of the prophets, Isaiah, Amos. I could have borne witness to that light, and I never did. It was just silence. And then over time, as we worked with the churches in Mexico, we came to realize that actually we weren't doing very much for them, but it was their impact on us, is what we were taking home, seeing their example of faith and grace and light, living in very difficult situations that they lived in situations of extreme poverty and oppression. Seeing their lives was something that I could have taken home and told to people around me at work who were wondering why I was leaving work, what was I doing? And I did not bear witness to that light. I did not have a positive witness. In fact, I may have had a negative witness, because over time people assumed I was going to Baja to spend time on the beach and, order Dos Equis or whatever. So that whole opportunity to bear witness to the light, I think in a context that people from Davis would have understood and respected, given the values of our community, I think I had a possibility to share something. I'm helping the poor because this is my vision of the world that Christ has given me to help the needy. I think that would have been a listen to and a witness to that point. So I think that's something we need to do, and I think there's a couple of reasons for that I'm going to highlight this morning. One is, it's a scriptural imperative. Jesus says, you are to be my witnesses to the ends of the earth. Okay? In another place in Colossians, Paul writes that we are Christ's ambassadors, and that God is making his appeal through us. It's through our words and actions that God is making his appeal to the world. So we should bear witness because that is a scriptural imperative, what we're called to do. In addition to that, another reason is we're looking for renewal at LCI. And we've started on some programs, hiring director of worship and music, looking to renovate the sanctuary, starting a more contemporary service at 10:30, now twice a month. There's many things we're trying to do to renew the church. And at the council meetings, urged on by Colcor, we spend lots of time discussing renewal of LCI. But I don't think any of these programs in the end are going to be that effective unless we are witnessing to the light of this Christ. I think for myself, my wife, perhaps many of you, especially if you didn't grow up in Christian homes, what drew you to Christ and to participation in the church was the words of people around us that we knew, loved, or trusted, and their witness was something that drew us in. And I think the same sort of thing needs to happen here for us really to be renewed as a congregation, that our faith is renewed and our witness is renewed to share the light of Christ to others. So the first point, main point I want to make today is about combining the light of our actions. And I know in this congregation we're doing many things that are salt and light, things connected to climate change, things connected to helping the poor, the Interfaith Rotating Winter Shelter, and many other actions. Combining the light of our actions with witnessing to the source of that light, which is Jesus. Okay, so point number one, combining light with witness. Okay. Point number two, combining grace with action. So if you take out this bulletin insert, now we know as Christians, and especially as Lutherans, that we're saved by grace. And this is spoken of many times in the New Testament, and is especially encapsulated here in Ephesians 2:8-9. Okay? For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God, not the result of works. Cornerstone of our faith. Okay? So we're all good with that, right? We're not saved by works, we're saved by grace. Yes. And then Paul goes on to write in the next verse, for we are what he has made us, created in Christ Jesus for good works. Whoops. Which God prepared beforehand to be our way of life. Isn't that amazing? It's like in front of all of us, God has like set somehow good works for us to do as each one of us uses our talents and gifts and abilities, like spoken of in Ephesians 4 and other places that we're each uniquely gifted. And that perhaps in front of each one of us there lies gifts, there lies things for us to do that we're uniquely equipped to do. Okay? And this is I think a dynamic picture that we're saved not by good works, but we're saved in order so that we could do good works to glorify God. It's a picture of action. And Paul uses other very active metaphors and word pictures to describe this faith in Christ that he's living out. He says in Colossians that he toils and struggles with all the energy that God gives him to build a church. Toiling and struggling. In other places, he uses the picture of a race, that the Christian life is a race. And he speaks of it as being, of himself as being like an athlete, that we are being training in our faith. He uses all these very dynamic word pictures. So we're saved by grace, but like we're lit up for action. And Martin Luther said there could be no light without fire. Okay? And that fire should be burning within us to send us forth to do good works, to share Christ's life. And I really appreciated Dick's reading of Philippians 3. It's one of my favorite passages in all of the New Testament, where Paul writes of his upbringing as a Pharisee, persecutor of the church, filled with zeal, of the tribe of Benjamin. He had all the boxes of religious correctness checked off. But it was all like rubbish compared to knowing Christ, as he experienced Christ on the Damascus Road and then came to follow Jesus. All that stuff about his religious superior upbringing was just garbage compared to knowing Christ and having the righteousness that comes through faith. But then he doesn't even stop there, but he goes on and says, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the heavenly call of God in Christ Jesus. So it's like when we come to Christ, for me, I was not raised in a Christian family. I came to be a Christian when I was about age 20. I was baptized. And it wasn't, in a sense, that was the end of a process, but also it was, I think, like the beginning of a race, the way Paul describes it. And now we're set forth to do those good works that God has created beforehand for us to do. And we toil, and we struggle, and we strain, and we press forward to glorify God and to shine the light of Jesus Christ. So, we're saved by grace. We can rest in that assurance. But we're also saved to do good works. So my closing words are, press on, strain forward, do good works, not for salvation, but to shine the light of Christ, and bear witness to the light that he is the source of light, sending you forth.